Okay, so that's enough on the U.S. Let's look at Donald. Mr. Donald Trump. Fortunately, we have an accurate birth time, whereas Scorpio Hillary would never let us know.
I know.
You know? So he's a Gemini. He thinks he's a Leo. Pretends he's a Taurus. In his childhood, he had to be a Sagittarius, in a manner of speaking. Now, Hilarion says someone who is Gemini is someone who has in previous lives developed mental abilities at a very high degree and level and use them in the service of others. And they have a potential connection with that higher mental energy. Their lesson is to integrate their higher mind with their lower everyday thinking mind. Otherwise, they can be a little scattered and unfocused, or mentally or verbally critical and abusive, and kind of nyeh, 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 nyeh. And I always say to Geminis, first of all, when someone says to me they're Gemini, I say, both of you are Gemini? But, you know, they need to integrate this higher mind with this lower everyday thinking mind. And I personally believe every sign in the zodiac really needs to learn how to meditate. Geminis have to meditate. Just for added effect. You know? But it's the only way they're going to get a grip on that high frequency mental energy. Now, his sun is conjunct Uranus in Gemini, so it's even more like wacky. And it's in the 10th house, Capricorn house, of work, career, role in the world. So that's where he lives. Now, but he's got a positive Jupiter trines to that Sun Uranus there. And a Jupiter Uranus trine, that's like a note of genius. Those are people that know how to think outside of the box and do things in an unconventional, expansive way. And Jupiter in the second house is usually good luck around money. There's also got Neptune there square to Mercury, which I'll get to later. But obviously he's made a lot of money. And, you know, and this is this really big, positive, expansive, clever, witty, Gemini, Uranian, unconventional energy that he puts to great effect. You know, and going from real estate to The Apprentice, to, you know.
Adoration.
Yeah. But first of all, it's opposite to his moon. And, you know, Hilarion says something about the moon in the 4th house that you would never know to just look at him, but I can sense it. You know, that people with moon in the 4th house actually prefer to retreat from life. Usually because, but if it's difficultly aspected, you know, you don't get away with it. In many cases, it's because they lived too sequestered from life in a domestic scene or a monastery or convent. And they've lost the ability to fend for themselves in the rough and tumble of the outside world. But karmically, you may have to experience exposure to the harshness of the world at an early age, and this is karmic for having forced others, possibly your own children, being exposed to the harshness of the world before they were ready. And this is opposite this sun in the 10th house, which sun in the 10th house is where you expect to be successful, if not famous, based on previous lives of accomplishment. But if it's difficultly aspected, you may have difficulties in manifesting the career role that you yearn for, because in previous lives there's been a tendency to identify yourself in terms of what you do, rather than who you are. So the moon also representing childhood. See, but again, this moon that prefers to retreat from life, it's why even when he was on the campaign trail, every weekend he had to go home.
Still doing it.
He's still doing it. That's why he won't give up Mar-a-Lago or his Trump Towers, and he still has to go to his retreat space.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he's got Saturn heading towards it's already starting to oppose the Uranus. It's going to conjunct the moon and oppose the sun. So that dichotomy, that tension, is going to get more stressed. It already is with Saturn in his 4th house. But I think that this had to have been a dynamic in his childhood. And I would bet money, there hasn't been too many biographies that I can tell that have really gone into his childhood in detail. They deal with that kind of generally, and then they focus on more him in his adult years. But I get a feeling that his Scottish mother was sort of like Moon, left at home, and the dad was gone a lot, and working and so on. And he probably was really identified with his role, just to have been that hustling developer that he was, And he was a feisty guy, and it's like, and Donald as a young child might have been this little moon boy hiding out in home, and his dad was out there. But then at a certain age, he would come, what I tell my clients is an FTS. Fuck that shit. And he'd become the Uranian wacky, Gemini edgy boy that was so feisty he got in fights with his teachers, and they had to send him to military school. So he's like out of the nest. He couldn't. He really got free of that. But he's still always going to have this polarity. And the thing is, I remember Liz Green saying, until you heal and integrate both ends of a difficult aspect, the tendency is to project one end or another on somebody else, which to me will explain relationships that you always look back on and go, why did I ever get with someone like that? And it's these denied parts of ourselves. So he's got lots of women he leaves at home, But then he has like Ivanka Trump, who kind of fought back and had her own fame and stuff, and brought his vulnerabilities in his home and family life and his relationship to his children. There was some edgy issues there. Now, the other thing, though, about his money trip is this Neptune square Mercury in Cancer. Yep. Not conjunct, but same sign. It conjuncts our Venus. And but again, there's likely to be some confusion, illusion, delusion, victimhood, or martyrdom around money and finances. So 5 bankruptcies, but he never loses money. Everybody else does. He makes everybody the victims. His workers, his investors, and he's, but all the biographies have noted that the number, prior to now, there's new issues now, but historically, the one thing you could write about Donald Trump that would immediately piss him off tremendously and have him come out attacking you is to write that he's not as wealthy as he says he is. But there's this Neptune vulnerability and delusion, and yeah, that's probably why he won't put out his tax returns.
Not because he's hiding something, but because of his ego.
It's just because of it. It's just because it would show the emperor's wearing no clothes. Yeah.
And is his moon, I can't see the chart that far, is
Yeah.
that in Taurus?
No, Sagittarius.
Oh, Sagittarius.
Sagittarius. Yeah. Now, it's got 3 planets in the 11th house, which Hilarion says his most non-traditional interpretation is what he says about the 11th house. Most of what Hilarion says elsewhere parallels traditional astrology, although to me he gives a much more specific karmic pronouncement. But what he says about the 11th house is totally from left field. Or is it right field? He says it's actually the house of karma with former enemies. Individuals with whom you've had rivalry or conflict in previous lives. And yeah, and he's got 3 planets there, so he's got history or karma he's got to work out there. Now he has Pluto and Mars in the 12th house of the deeper unconscious and the inner life. But Hilarion says something interesting. He says the 12th house represents the memory of the most recent past life. Now, clearly, for those of us who believe in reincarnation, everybody has had whatever was their most recent past life. Not everyone has planets in the 12th house. Those who do are particularly being affected by it. And the nature of the planets and the aspects to those planets will give you clues to the nature of that life. Well, Pluto there is where the last lifetime is one where you went through major transformation. But it leaves you with insecurity in this life because of a lot of the things you learned were newly developed and don't have a long string of previous lives behind it to back it up. Now, Liz Green, when I studied with her, she said she didn't know where she stood on the doctrine of reincarnation. And she says the 12th house represents what she calls the inherited family daemon, or the inherited family unconscious that you get programmed with. My firm belief and conviction now is that it's both. That you're carrying this past life memory of this intense Pluto transformation, and you incarnate in a family where there's some intense Pluto. Like a family that changed their name from Trumpf to Trump so they wouldn't know they were German, you know, or even telling people they were Swedish, you know, during World War II, yeah. And he was born just at the end of that. That's in the family unconscious. But the thing that's very curious to note about this Pluto, it doesn't have any difficult aspects. And it doesn't have any positive aspects. It is unaspected. It dangles there by itself. Which on the one hand, Liz Green says that makes it where it will tend to live a little bit in the unconscious and not be easily integrated into conscious awareness. Well, Pluto is always a little bit unconscious anyway. The 12th house is unconscious, you know? So it's really like, and it's telling in that he said that he doesn't want to analyze himself ever, because he might not like what he finds. Oh, yeah, he actually said that. But that, to me, it's relatable to someone who has no conscious relationship to Pluto. And if Pluto hits him, it's always their fault.
Right.
You know, it's not his own need to go deep into a view of himself. You know?
Would a sociopath have that kind of...
It could be relatable, you know. Yeah. But I also get a feeling that this last lifetime also may have been major transformation, but one where he was like really cut off from people. Really like in his own kind of world. Which is interesting in relation to what Hilarion says about having the sound of the letter D in your name. Because in his book called Symbols, he tells about many different symbolic systems, like the numbers and sounds in a name and different things where it's been orchestrated to give us information or messages. And he says the D sound in a name makes it where you're always going to be a little bit alone. Always a little bit in your own world. I mean, even when you're in personal relationships, you're still going to be like in your own world. Which is very interesting when we get to the inauguration chart. But, you know, one of the books I wrote is Charles and Diana, the inside story. And there was Diana and her boyfriend, Dodie. That's a lot of D's, you know. And they were like two lonely kids that found each other, you know. So, but now we come to the scariest part of Donald Trump. He thinks he's a Leo. Now, this is something he shares with George W. Bush, Al Gore, Sarah Palin, and Prince Charles.
Wow. Is that
Leo rising?
All Leo rising. They all think they're Leos. George W. Bush thought he was a Leo. He was really a Cancer. I mean the sign of Cancer.
right?
He's really a carry, mushy, nurturing guy, but he thought he was Leo. What Hilarion says about Leo rising, he says it gives a self-image of oneself that has Leo qualities. A certain pride, elegance, perhaps a tinge of arrogance or superiority. But it's actually been given to someone because in previous lives they have had difficulty feeling good about themselves. It's to help boost them up. It's not like a Leo sun person who really is an egomaniac, like Bill Clinton. That's a real Leo. You know?
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah, he's a true Leo. Bush was faking it, but with Bush it was obvious, you know, that he was really insecure behind that smarmy arrogance of his.
In the scheme, Cheney.
But,
Puppeteer.
well, you know what they said? That if Dick Cheney had died, Bush would have become president. Now, but first of all my clients that have enough conscious awareness to be willing to fork out a bunch of money to listen to what I'm going to really say about them, who have Leo rising, you know, are aware of this. You know, when I say, so you're not as strong as you look, and they say, they know that. Trump doesn't know this. So this statement, I don't want to analyze myself, it's even scarier. Because he doesn't know he's faking it.
Yeah.
Now, one of the reasons for that, I think, is this Mars right on top of it, in Leo. Now, it's technically in the 12th, but it's conjunct to the ascendant. It's very much pulled into the first of self-image. And this is why whenever anyone, anything touches that fear and that insecurity, his reaction is to fight back 10 times harder.
Twitter account.
Just immediately hit him back.
Sweet.
You know, I mean, even Muslim parents of a soldier killed in Iraq, he's got to hit him back. He has to. And he's been doing that since he was a kid.
Yeah, that's true. Bully. He's a bully.
Yeah, he's a narcissist bully who's totally insecure and faking it. This is scary.
Everything I think he knows a little bit. That's why Ivanka lives with him now. I think he's feeling a little. Or she knows.
Well, I'll tell you one of the most telling elements in his current astrological reality. On July 25th, which was like 3 days after the Republican convention, his progressed sun, the movement of your identity through the chart, conjuncted his ascendant.
Wow.
2 days after the convention. So it's time for him to see this about himself. And the other thing that is rather scary or interesting or significant or different ways of describing it, Hafez asked me to talk about the eclipse. Well, the eclipse is going to be in the 29th degree of Leo. I mean the solar eclipse. And an eclipse is really death, rebirth. And a solar eclipse is the death of the conscious with the eruption of the unconscious. And it eclipses it, and then it's reborn. But I've also noticed that the landmass where eclipses are visible tend to go through heavy stuff in the years after. I remember there was an eclipse that went across Pakistan, and then all of a sudden they had these floods. And it went across Iran, and all of a sudden they had an earthquake. You know, so it's like it's kind of creating this death. And it is trippy that its most visible part of its journey is as it goes across continental U.S., from Oregon to South Carolina. But it's going to be within 1 degree of his Leo ascendant. Death, rebirth, right on his self-image. So that could be the death of his faking it or something. It's
Death of what?
his faking that he's stronger than he is, you know, or having to be more aware of it or something, you know. He's feeling insecure, and it's a backlash. You know, and the thing is, for these people, it was one thing to get them to stretch and try to accept a black president. But then after that, to try to shove down their throat a woman president, I mean, it doesn't take a political genius to say that was not a good move. I mean, these people are just not ready to push them that far.
Especially a woman who is perceived as being very hard-bitten.
Yeah, especially. But the other thing is neither Hillary or Trump got as many votes as Mitt Romney did.
Really?
Yeah. Romney lost the election with more votes than either one of those guys got. That's a very telling statistic. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
On the other side of that, though, I worked voting in Pasco County, and there were people come in our age who had never voted before.
To vote for
Numerous.
Trump?
Huh?
To vote for
Oh,
Trump?
I'm sure they did.
Yeah. Well,
People. The forgotten people.
right. Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. You know, the people that feel like, you know, and
Thought Hillary was a slam dunk. He didn't vote.
it's,
Didn't vote either.
I mean, in the BBC, I listen to in the middle of the night when I can't sleep. And they were in Nebraska interviewing people about how they were feeling about why they voted for Trump and how they feel about what's going on and stuff. And the thing is all these agriculture people there, first of all, they said NAFTA was the best thing that ever happened to them, that the TPP was going to be great for them. They were going to make $375 million in Nebraska. And they're also like totally dependent, absolutely, on undocumented immigrant labor. They all know this, that they're screwed without it. So then they say, well, why did you vote for Trump? 2 reasons. The Supreme Court and social issues, gay marriage, abortion, and the EPA, which came to tell them they gotta control water and not let all the nitrates destroy the water, and those are the 2 reasons. But, those are the surface reasons, but in addition, So, but the thing is I still have faith that eventually, Obama was so hopeful that the country was changing and waking up, and obviously Democrats didn't show up, and it's like, it really annoyed me that people who went from Bernie Sanders to Trump, and it's this self-righteous thing, and the one, like Noam Chomsky was the only one who really was staying a human and not a self-righteous Sagittarian ideologue. And he said, Hillary's not great, but Trump is so much worse. And the fact is, you can say you're voting your conscience, but then there's this thing called math, And any vote that's not for Hillary is a vote for Trump. So like a lot of those protesters the day after the election, I'm sure voted for Jill Stein, And I have a bumper sticker. I've never actually decided to put it on my vehicle, but I like it. It says, under the Republicans, man exploits man. Under the Democrats, it's just the opposite.
Same thing.